Through the Mayhem, the Silently podcast series, bringing marketing industry leaders together to discuss the ever-shifting media landscape. Learn about the ins and outs of real-time marketing, influencers, data privacy, technology, and so much more. All from industry experts with real experience, giving you the real answers. Now, let's break through the mayhem.
Hello, and welcome to Silently's Breaking Through the Mayhem podcast. I'm joined today by Jason Schulweis, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Female Quotient. What's going on, Jason?
I'm just really happy and grateful to be here with you today, Alena. Thank you.
Of course, happy to have you. So before we jump in, I have to ask if you're experiencing any jet lag. I feel like you're always jet setting for your role.
Jet setting sounds very glamorous. But yes, it's definitely a lot of travel. But it's always going to amazing places where we have amazing people in our FQ community. So yes, I am generally always a little bit jet lagged, but always feeling very fulfilled and just, happy with what I get to do. And as a parent of two young children, I'm always tired. So the
perpetual jet lag
between different types of tired is, semantics.
Yeah. Yep. Love that. So before we jump into all things Female Quotient, I usually open these with, giving the bio of the person we're interviewing, but I think it's actually more interesting to hear it from the horse's mouth. So would love for you to speak to your career journey and your background that's led you to the Female Quotient.
Absolutely. So, I graduated in 2008, which was a terrible time to graduate. And I got very lucky in that there was a really cool up and coming digital agency in New York called Deep Focus. They were doing a lot of innovative things in social. Mind you, that's when social was, Facebook ads and hyper targeting on MySpace. But they were hiring for, an internship, and I jumped at it. I had no idea what I was doing. But I really fell in love very quickly with media and advertising. And I felt that I got very lucky. There's no two ways to really, talk through that. And I picked it up very quickly. There, even at 22, 23, I got to run very large campaigns and programs for HBO and AMC and Microsoft Bing, some Estee Lauder work. And so it was just fascinating to me.
What was the big HBO show at the time? What were you promoting?
Well, there were a few really big ones there. The few that we actually got kind of written up from an awards perspective. There was a big one for True Blood, for Eastbound and Down.
Yep, love that too.
Flight of the Conchords.
Yep.
We did a lot for HBO boxing too. But those other ones were really cool and big and allowed us to do some really innovative work.
That's awesome. Makes me nostalgic, all those show names.
Yeah, I feel like I need to go back and rewatch rewatch a lot of those. But it's so funny, a lot of the innovation at the time was synced rich media units that would interact on a page.
Right.
I'm, fortunately not touching IAB ad units at the moment, but it was great. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of the work that we did was partnering with a lot of really great publishers and media partners. And I really started to gravitate to that space. Two of the biggest partners that we worked with were Yahoo and Thrillist. My next two stops on my career were actually Yahoo and Thrillist. And I got to know the Yahoo team just from, all the meetings that we had and all the media and content that we were running on the site. And it's a very kind of natural switch to go from, I think, on the agency side doing media planning, to the publisher side doing account management. And so that was kind of the first jump and my first foray into the sales and revenue side, or the dark side. And I loved it. I got to work on more big accounts. And from there, because I had the background with Deep Focus, I started hosting a lot of these social media roundtables and education sessions for a lot of the Yahoo employees, just like, what are big brands doing? What are the opportunities? Because at the time, Yahoo thought social was like Yahoo Answers, Yahoo Groups, and and Yahoo Mail, but they weren't really understanding that, like, wait, they have this treasure trove of content that, when kind of like utilized on these social platforms, could create a lot of engagement, a lot of conversation. um and it's again very fortuitous that around the same time Yahoo bought a company called Citizen Sports, which was doing a lot in the mobile and social space. They created the first Yahoo Social Solutions team, and I was the
Mhm.
first internal hire onto that team. um and that was fascinating, and I loved it, and it allowed me to start to put together some really big ideas and packages, and I loved putting together big ideas and packages, and so moved over to more of like the integrated marketing side there. That's ultimately what I did at Thrillist as well, which was a lot of fun because, again, at that time, I was going out a lot, and what Thrillist was talking about, like the best places to eat and drink. Um,
Mhm.
that was actually very useful for,
Yeah.
for me as a human.
Back in my agency days, Thrillist always had the best events for that reason. It was not surprising.
Yeah, and I mean, we had Hotel Thrillist and Taco Knockout and Best Day of Your Life, and it was really cool because those were just really amazing. Ben, the CEO and founder of a co-founder of Thrillist, would always say that those were like physical branded content,
Mhm.
like opportunities.
Right.
Um, those, and like we would partner with like Giant Spoon and GE to create like a moon boot in celebration of the 45th anniversary of the moon landing, or like a scientifically engineered hot sauce.
Yeah.
And so there were different ways to like bring brands to life, and I thought that was always really fascinating too. um Also around that time, I fell in love with going to live music, which got kind of like Live Nation as a real workplace opportunity on my radar. Applied to an integrated marketing role there, was able to get it. And that was also so cool because it was a way to, have my personal passions also be what I love to do professionally. Um, I was there for 2.5 years. Um, and, at that point, I had been doing integrated marketing a long time, and just a very big marketing and industry nerd. Just I love understanding like how things work, how leadership is making decisions, a lot of those sorts of things. Um, and there was this company that was in the background where, it was talked about at Yahoo. We worked with them at Thrillist. We worked with them at Live Nation, MediaLink. Um, and I realized, like, I wasn't at a place in my life where I wanted to go get a secondary degree or a master's. And, what better way to get a really good understanding of the industry than to, to try to work with a company that works with every single, company in the space, and get a, peek under the hood at how these companies work. And I was able to work hand in hand with CMOs and CEOs and CROs, and really help them run and grow their businesses. Part of the responsibility there is always, again, kind of like keeping your ear to the ground and understanding what's new and happening. Newsletters were a very big thing, or versioning thing, like at that
Which is
time,
crazy to think about now. Yeah.
which is crazy to think about now. Um, and so Morning Brew got put on my radar. I started subscribing. I thought it was great. It turns out one of my very good friends, who we didn't overlap at Michigan, but he also went to Michigan. His name's Phil Schwimmer. Um, he and I were catching up. He knew the founders from Michigan.
Mhm.
And so there's a big kind of like, Michigan alum, uh, kind of like a tradition, or not really tradition, but rather just a thread, there. And he introduced me to Alex Lieberman, who was a CEO and co-founder of Morning Brew. We went out for a drink, and there was an immediate connection. And he kind of explained that, they were hiring for a head of brand partnerships, a salesperson, like a head of sales.
Mhm.
And I had never done field sales at that time, but by then I had held just about every single role inside of a revenue organization. I had a really good network, and I could sell. And, I kind of pitched myself after the fact saying, look, you might be looking for, a salesperson, which would be a great hire for right now. But if, this company is a rocket ship,
Mhm.
we're going to start growing exponentially. The revenue organization is going to look fundamentally entirely different in a few months. And so, what you would get with me is someone who has seen what the kind of like the outcome and multiple outcomes like actually should look like and can help get there, and someone who can speak a lot of these different roles and languages from like a professional empathy standpoint, because I've done those things.
Well, and that makes sense too, right? Because I'm sure they were going from a place of wanting to build their subscriber list to maybe figuring out what partnerships as a role looked like. So you were kind of forward thinking in that sense.
Exactly. And it was a very interesting thing too, where it was like, we also need to not just sell newsletters. We need to take a look at what we are selling and what, it was content. It
Mhm.
wasn't newsletters. It wasn't just ad placements. It was like, it was sponsored content and branded content. And just even that immediate, you know, branding shift for what
Mhm.
we were selling, like opened up a world of, advertising dollars for us.
Right.
Um, and so that was just a really incredible 3.5 years where, we grew revenue like 20x. In those 3.5 years, grew headcount about 20x as well. um, through the sale of the company to Business Insider and Axel Springer, and just such an amazing experience. And what you see today is a lot of what we had started to build, where it's so truly a multimedia company that does events, social content, a ton of video, works with creators. Yes, there's still a great newsletter business,
Mhm.
but it looks like a real modern media company.
Right.
Um, so after that, I worked at Mind Body Green for a year as CRO, which was such an amazing learning experience to be at a company that was, yes, doing like media and content, but also had CPG products and had a commerce offering and had an education offering. And so it was just for me such a cool way to better understand the different ways that brands can engage with a consumer and the different things that, ultimately a consumer can buy from a brand. Um, Fast forward a year, so about like 15, 16 months ago, um, as that was winding down, I started talking to the Female Quotient team. And I have known them actually for a long time. Because when I was at MediaLink, we were always at the same events.
Right.
And, I would always make sure to stop by what was the girls' lounge, then was the equality lounge, and is now the FQ lounge. And it always just felt more like home to me in terms of the people that went there, the types of conversations that were happening, the level of the depth really of relationships that you were able to create and cultivate, and the types of real things that people were talking about on stage. Like it didn't sound like multiple people on a panel competing for airtime and trying to pitch their products. Um, and I just thought that was so amazing that like that is the vibe and the energy and environment that this company has built. And the team, Talia and Shelly, are just two of the most impressive people like I know, period.
Yeah.
And so, I'd gotten to know them over the years, and Shelly's involved with UJA, and I got to talk to Talia a bunch, and over the years, I would just offer my time and advice as they started to initially think about how to turn FQ into a media company, because I hadn't done that, and they saw a lot of similarities with like Morning Brew and what FQ could be. And so, sorry for that little roundabout way to get back to where we are.
Um, It helps contextualize it.
Yeah, when my stint at My Body Green was winding down, I was talking to Talia about, media and those sorts of things, and maybe I could come on as a consultant. And then that quickly led to like, you know what would this look like to just come on and do this like full time?
Yeah.
Um, and so like from a professional standpoint, it was such a no-brainer because of the degree to which I admired the leadership in the company. I understood what the company was doing and where they wanted to go again, because I've kind of like done that and seen that. Um, and then on a personal side, my daughter is 4. Um, my son is 2, but when my daughter was born, I was still at Morning Brew, but I think a seed was planted in that moment in my brain, because her birth, her existence was like the single most like transformative moment of my life. Like you you could feel like your whole sense of being change, your heart change, like everything changed.
Identity figures. Yeah.
Yeah, in that moment. And it's like, oh, I live for you,
Hmm.
you know? And so I feel like that seed just kept growing and growing and growing. And so like when the opportunity to actually like work at FQ, and one of the things that I always kind of come back to is like, when your first child, or when any child, any of your children are born, you feel like as a parent, it's your job and responsibility to prepare them for the world. And what FQ is doing, and now like what I'm able to help do at FQ, is actually prepare the world for her. And that is like such the I might get very emotional talking about it, but it's like that is like such a true like calling, for me. And I think it's just a very like meaningful and impactful opportunity, to really like do something and help change the world for the better. And it's, Shelley always says, when purpose meets passion, you're unstoppable. And I feel like that's like, where I'm at now.
Right. And it's really sort of your career evolution meeting you at your personal life, right? And kind of those colliding too. And I believe your wife works in media also. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of personal touch role for you.
Yes, yes, we have very romantic conversations about CPMs and
Love that. Okay. So I have seen on LinkedIn that the Female Quotient is celebrating the 10-year anniversary. I know you've been there for a year and a half. So kind of curious if you can look back on, before you joined the team, what that evolution has looked like today, and then what
Mhm.
that evolution has looked like since you joined the team. Because I know you were saying they kind of the Female Quotient comes from this activation background. That's what you guys are known for, right? Is your epic lounges. But you really joined the team to help round it out into a holistic media company. So kind of curious what that's been like, and then what the next 10 years look like.
10-year, yeah, I
Better
mean,
be right.
I wish I had a crystal ball that could tell me 10 years into the future. So the company, to your point, was really started as a physical space, started really for women to have a safe, warm, welcoming, positive space and experience at, a lot of these events and conferences that were so overwhelmingly male. And very fortunately, that has really, grown to be, to include men and advocates and allies and conscious leaders. And it's a very special environment still. And so it's awesome that is a through line that has stayed. Um, when the pandemic hit, the FQ very quickly, I think, was one of the first event first companies to pivot to virtual events. And I believe over COVID, FQ ran around 800 virtual events. Um, and because everyone wanted the connection and the community to stay.
Mhm.
And so we were able to really, remain consistent, in our mission and how people were really connecting with us. what ended up happening also was that there was, a huge spike in the growth of our digital community, largely Instagram and LinkedIn.
hmm
And those are still our two largest communities. Um, Coming out of the pandemic, once, the event piece came back, the events and the digital content that we like got in the habit of creating and we're continuing to create was very much like a 1+1 = 3 equation.
hmm
Because not only were we doing these events, we were, creating tons and tons of content. I'm sure you see and you follow, like we are very prolific, content creators. And we also, though, live stream all of our panels. We're creating content on site. And so there's like this middle bucket of like a Venn diagram, which is like experiential content, which allows us to like take all the magic and conversation that's happening in the lounges and push that out to our many millions of followers in our community around the world. Um, be Over the course of the year of 2024, we went from about 2 million followers across all of our socials to over 6 million.
Wow.
And so that was a huge exponential, kind of like point in time of growth where that is largely continuing. And it was a signal also to us that, the content that we're creating is really good. We're going to continue to do that. The live streams get a ton of views and a ton of engagement. I think, depending on what the platform is, the engagement on our content is like 5 to 7 times the industry average. And so that has allowed us to like experience this organic growth where we have not had to turn on any paid growth mechanisms.
Yeah.
So that's I think a very rare, sort of thing to be able to say. We are going to continue, to create a lot of content. And I think the biggest evolution, to kind of like get back specifically to your question is that we had been doing content and media actually for some time,
hmm
but we hadn't been really talking about those things as content and media products.
hmm
And so, there was a very immediate, quick, low-hanging fruit sort of opportunity when I first joined is to say, like, let's look at a lot of these packages that we've been partnering with, brands on with the lounges that included the live stream, that included these like LinkedIn quote cards, that included executive interviews, that like all of these things, like they should still be part of the package, but we need to be talking about those things as valuable in and of their own right, and as media and content products. And so that gave us, I think, a really good, you know, stepping stone or, kind of like step to say, we do content and media.
Yeah.
Um, we are creating more original content. We've got, a series and format that everyone really knows us for that's called Take It to the Streets, where, we're out and about with an FQ microphone asking like really important questions tied to women's health or leadership and careers and business. And, when people see the FQ microphone, everyone kind of flocks also to
hmm
us. We generally don't have to go ask people. It's very recognizable. And again, with over 4 million followers on Instagram, there is a big consumer push and, outside of everything that we do in the, industry conference circuit.
Yeah.
And so what you'll see from us very soon is more content at events. We have a content studio now at every single event. Um, we're creating a ton of actual FQ originals with Shelly, with a lot of our like celebrity and talent friends. And so you'll see more and more media and content from us. And the initial response has been just really incredible.
That's awesome. I'm seeing the name FQ Leaders come up a lot. Can you
We
speak to that?
just, yes, we just had a really big push around that. And so that, if you don't already follow FQ Leaders on Instagram, please do.
I do. Don't worry.
But it was, it's something that we really wanted to do because the idea of leaders and leadership is so important to us. And that's been part of our DNA since day one. Our space is a space, both a physical space and a digital space for leaders to really come and turn their insights, their everything into action and impact. And, you know, it's, there's just a huge opportunity to continue to focus on, a lot of the leaders who have been with us for 10 years, but also what does the next generation of leadership look like, for us and for the over 30 industries that we're in. And so, there is enough there, both from an audience quantity perspective and a content perspective, to kind of carve out that as something that we want to continue to like really focus on, and invest in.
Right. Yeah. So when you speak about leadership at the Female Quotient, you can't not talk about Shelley. So I'd just be curious, like, a lot of us see her in the public persona, but I'd love to hear about sort of what her role is like from the inside and what it's like to work with her.
It's amazing to work with her, and it's amazing, to work for her. She is so, uh, she is very genuinely inspirational. She has more energy than anyone else on earth. Um, she is an operator. She has built companies and sold companies. She quite literally pioneered online research. Um, and so her vision and her ability to will things into existence is quite literally unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. Like the fact that, we have such a deep relationship with F1 Academy, and that they branded one of their cars, in rose gold.
So cool.
FQ branding was raced, in the Netherlands last year, is featured on the F1 Academy series on Netflix. And by the way, will also be parked out front of the Martinez in Cannes.
Oh, cannot wait.
Um, she she has these ideas and is just able to make it happen. And it's like it's very remarkable.
That's awesome. So I do want to address something that I feel like we've talked about before, and I'm sure comes up a lot for you in your role, and that is that people are often surprised that men can be, involved in the
Yeah.
female quotient or the FQ. And I wanted to sort of dig into what that's like for you in terms of your role in the company, your role as an ally, and kind of stepping into that space. Because you were speaking about your media experience, but this is a very unique role in that way.
For sure. When I back in the day when I first started going to, the lounges, there were men there, but there weren't a ton of men. And, when I would tell people where I was going, they'd be like, I didn't even know that men, could come into
Yeah.
into the space. And I was like, yes, they can.
Right.
Um,
Right. This wasn't made to be exclusive.
Yeah, and it's like, it was always really, well, yes, it was originally designed for, for women to have a place to go and to meet other women in those industries. It's also really important that a lot of the conversations that, were happening there need to kind of like transcend and ensure that they don't happen in a silo or an echo chamber, and that men and conscious leaders, any leaders, are participating and active, advocates and participants and allies, so that change can happen.
Yeah.
Um, but very similar to when I had started going to the lounge, when I took the job, I had some people be like, "Wait, what? But you're a man." I'd be like, "Yes."
Right.
And that's okay. It's like, and I would kind of share it. It's like, here's what I've seen, over time, and more men are coming in, more men are on some panels as well. And, we have fun with it too, where, a lot of the times we have like our signature manel, where, men can also talk about like the women who have helped, mentor them and manage them, and the leadership lessons they learned from the women in their lives. And, Can last year, we also, asked some men questions that men don't normally don't get asked, and only women get asked.
Hmm.
And so there are great ways in which, we can incorporate men both from a, very kind of like real topic and conversation perspective, but also, in a way that's also fun. And, I think also a lot of the men that come in now really do understand um, the value that they can bring and the responsibility that they have, to make all of our industries better and to really contribute to, what the future needs to be.
Right. And that's where I want to give Sightly a shout out and Adam Katz a shout out. We were running the data for International Women's Day, and we knew we had a lot of women in leadership at Sightly, but it's 59% of our leadership team, which I know is well above the industry average. And it really is because Adam is so vocal and it's something that's so important to him. So it's cool to see it in practice. I think because Sightly is a startup, it's easier to kind of manage things like that. And I think that's where companies like the Female Quotient come in, is making sure that prioritizing that can scale.
100%, and big kudos to you all and to Adam, and it's great to see, and hopefully more companies follow suit.
100%. Another thing that comes to mind, sort of with the connection point with how Sightly practices that value, is we very much kind of look at how the contextual space can benefit from brand values. I think an often overlooked benefit of the nuance of contextual is making sure, underrepresented creators can monetize on what they're doing online. We've put a lot of work into making sure that brands who care about uplifting women's voices can also have that translate to their contextual approaches. And I feel like there's a lot of nuance in what you've been doing with Female Quotient in the media space, specifically not just speaking to women in sort of their business role, but like speaking to them holistically. So what does that look like in terms of like the evolution of it, as a media company, but also like the partnerships that you're gravitating toward?
Yeah, so I think there are two really interesting things in there, and I'll get to the partnership set in a second. But even when you talk about looking at people holistically,
Hmm.
and there is a B2B and B2C component from a partnership perspective that again I'll get to, but um, you know, or I guess this actually segues really nicely into it. A really good example of that is that we have been talking a lot over, the last few years. I mean, really for the last 10 years, but like it has significantly picked up in the last, year or two around health.
Hmm.
And even more specifically, Shelley, who is the ultimately by example person, um, she talks about health and her personal journey, like especially with menopause, where, she's now one of the leading voices on LinkedIn for a lot of topics, a lot of health topics that impact women.
Hmm.
And our stance is that women's health is health. Our stance is that we need to keep talking about these things so that any stigma around talking about those things goes away. And we're very happy to, of course, like again, lead by example from a corporate perspective because we follow Shelley's lead. Um, and so that has been a really incredible kind of piece. And Shelley stands there too, is like it's part of who she is. And part of who you are doesn't, it's not, we're not in severance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're not a different person. It's like you are the same person, and your health things, your family obligations, all of that stuff is with you, whether you're at home or whether you're at work. And so we need to be talking about that, like even in traditional work environments like a LinkedIn or like a Cannes Lion, like we need to be talking about those things in those places. Um, and so, we realized very quickly over the last 1 to 2 years that there are, in addition to the B2B, kind of like pitch that we were best known for, and we still obviously we do that really well given the amount of CEOs and CMOs that speak and attend our spaces. But there are also people too,
Hmm.
and our audience generally skews, between 25 and 55, largely female. high consideration, affluent, successful, aspirational, the subset that is extremely kind of like attractive to advertisers in finance. There's a
Right.
huge horizontal transfer of wealth that Shelley has written in Forbes about she called the feminization of wealth.
Mhm.
There is, a lot of opportunity in the kind of like pharma and healthcare space, in the, luxury retail and apparel space. Especially like if you think about, beauty, apparel, and luxury, this idea of powerful businesswomen and confidence being not just, both how you feel and how you look. And, we have confidence styling stations, and, Ferragamo is a big partner of ours, and they've been able to dress Shelley for a lot of, our really big events. And so we've seen now a big shift in the business where there are these opportunities with, a lot of more B2C brands and marketing budgets um, that have been hugely successful for us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I even think about when I've been to your lounge and I see people on the panel, like what they wear or how the vibe they're giving off is part of their brand. It's like it's holistic. You can't just define it by their role or their title.
100%. And, I think absolutely. And like, that's why we have like the confidence styling session. That's like why we partner with like, brand like Invisalign too, which their whole thing is around like your smile is really this, outward expression of confidence as well. And so there are these really natural ties to how, you know, like the B2C in you
Yeah.
translates to like the B2B, and it's like again, it's like it's two sides to the same person.
Yeah, and I also think that's so nice because historically those things have been minimized when it comes to women
Mhm.
like in those spaces is there, you're supposed to, and there's nothing wrong with wearing the power suit or whatever, but there's sort of these stereotypes of what you needed to do to be a woman in those spaces.
I mean, absolutely. It's we see that as like those are all, again, it's about confidence. It's about how you feel, how you want to show up, and there, we make sure that it's an environment which it's not calling, attention to like, oh, what are you wearing, or
Mm.
what those things are. It's like it's about your substance, and what you've done and what you can say, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, 100%. So I think we have time for one more question. I know we've gotten on some serious topics, so I wanted to end on a fun one. We'll bring things full circle with your jet lag or perpetual jet lag. Um, so you've gotten to go to all kinds of cool activations all over the world in your role. So I was just curious, selfishly, what your favorite was, and it doesn't necessarily need to be an entire activation. If it could be like a tidbit or a memory, uh,
Sure.
just wanted to end on sort of like a fun experience in your time at the Female Quotient.
For sure. The FQ Lounge in Cannes is, for lack of a better word, just epic and perfect.
Getting me.
It's like it's at the top of the Martinez. It's so beautifully designed. Like the content is great, but also like you're overlooking, the French Riviera, and it's just like a very just incredible experience. And so I never really understood when people were like, "Oh yeah, I have to go to Cannes," or it's like just let's take a step back and realize that like we're very fortunate that we get to do that. It's literally one of the most beautiful places on earth. So
Right.
like you know, um, but whereas that is beautiful always and an amazing experience, tied to like my own personal kind of like journey at FQ was probably South by of 2024, which was like my second day
Oh
at
wow.
FQ. And so it was a very
Threw
cool,
you into it.
well, yeah, but it's, I had always been, I've like run
Yeah,
events
yeah.
companies before, but I had never been like, on the inside at at an FQ lounge, and just seeing how everyone worked together and hearing people's feedback in just a much different light about what the lounge means to them and what they're learning and the connections that they're making. And like, that was just such an immediate like affirmation of that big career decision that I had made, or it was like, oh yeah, no shit, like this
Yeah, very
is
validating.
absolutely where I am supposed to be, and I cannot wait for everything that is to come.
I love that answer. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This was an awesome, awesome episode. I really appreciate everything you're doing in the space and making the time to chat with us today.
Thanks so much, Alena. You too.
Hi, I'm Hannah, one of the producers for Sightly's Breaking Through the Mayhem podcast. We want to thank you so much for listening to the show. If you want to learn more about the guests we had on today, we included additional information about them in the show notes. Finally, if you'd like to be on the podcast, or if you know someone that would make a great fit, you could fill out the form at sightly.com/podcast. We hope you have a great day.